I'm Martha McCallum, and this is the Untold story. It's great to have you with us today, and I'm excited because we're joined by someone who has created a lot of amazing film content and creative content, and one of his biggest projects most recently is The Saints, which we have just started season 2 of on Fox Nation. So I'm very glad to be joined by Matti Leshem. Matti, great to see you today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, Martha, it's great to see you.
So you have a long history in Hollywood. You have been involved in a lot of very big projects, including Rain Man and Diner and all these great Hollywood classics. And at one point, not too long ago, well, you can tell me how long ago it was, you went, got a meeting with Martin Scorsese, and you were told you'd have 30 minutes to pitch a project that you wanted to work on. Can you tell us about what happened in that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, you have your facts correct. I had come up with this idea to do a show about the Saints. It's something that I was really passionate about. And I decided that I wanted to do it with Martin Scorsese, but I didn't know him. And so it took me a very, very long time to get the meeting. And then one day somebody called me and said, Martin Scorsese will meet with you for 30 minutes if you come up to the Bel Air Hotel right now. And so I drove up there. I was ushered in. I opened my laptop and started to speak. And 30 minutes later, the assistant came in and said, your time is up, basically. And Mr. Scorsese said, hold on a second, we're not done. And 2.5 hours later, we were still in a deep theological conversation about the Saints. That's sort of how it began.
It's a great story. And I also would love for you to share with us your own personal story, your family's religious background, how you were raised. You went to a variety of different schools and got a lot of different theological input growing up.
So my parents were both devout atheists who prized education over anything else, but they were also very open. And weirdly, I was born a believer in a family of atheists. I am Jewish, and when we lived in, my father was an Israeli diplomat, and when he was ambassador to the UN, he sent me to a Orthodox school in New York called Ramaz. And then when he was stationed in Copenhagen, he sent me to a Catholic school because that was the best school in Copenhagen, where I was taught by Assumptionist nuns. And by the way, I'm not one of those people who has horror stories about nuns. I love those nuns. And I was really grateful to actually hear this. That was the first time I'd heard the story of Jesus Christ, actually. Mm-hmm. And I was introduced to it by I was a young actor, and I was cast as the innkeeper in the Nativity play, which was like the first time I really even heard that story. Wow. So it was amazing, and I was really taken by the stories of Christianity, and that's where I first heard about the Saints.
So are you Christian? Are you Jewish? What is your own personal faith now? I
am as Jewish as Mr. Scorsese is Catholic. And I think what's beautiful about Judaism and Catholicism is that they, in my mind, are part of the same divine conversation. Mm-hmm. And that in Judaism, you have a covenant, and in Christianity, you have the transformation of that covenant. And I always say to my friends, Christianity is Judaism 2.0. And it's been, for me, it's an amazing, amazing opportunity to work on this material and to work on these incredible stories.
First of all, I totally agree with you. As a Catholic I was raised in public schools, and so it took me a long time to get around to sort of really learning the Bible and actually going through it, through the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I think that it must be read as one large piece in order to understand both the Old and the New Testament. And I've always been fascinated by the lives of the saints. And I think one of the great things that you have done here is made their stories accessible. Once you dig into, Old Testament, New Testament, stories of the saints, it's tough to find this kind of drama and intensity anywhere else.
I think that's right. And I think, we're telling the stories of some very famous saints, or saints that we think are famous. Like our first episode is about St. Patrick, who generally people know so little about him, but his story is so compelling. But I think just to comment about your perspective on what I really think of as the Judeo-Christian ethic that permeates a lot of these stories, many of our stories this season really take place in first century Judea, we're privileged to tell the story of the Virgin Mary, which will be a special at Easter on Fox Nation. And we obviously have the story of Peter coming up next week. This Sunday will air on Fox Nation. And we're also going to tell the story this season of Longinus, who's the Roman centurion who pierces Christ in the side. So we have these amazing stories that really harken back to the advent of Jesus and the advent of Christianity. And to me, to your point, it is a kind of a continuum.
I want to play, I watched Patrick, and I've seen the first season, which is extraordinary. Joan of Arc was an incredible story, and everybody can watch all of the first season on Fox Nation, and Patrick is the one that has rolled out already, and as you point out, they're going to come out week after week. Let's play this clip from the new episode of St. Patrick.
I see that we have no choice other than to give all of ourselves to God, which means to give all of ourselves to those most in need. I saw it every minute of the day during my years as a slave. I was in Hibernia. I was herding sheep for the pagans who took me away from my home. And the people came to me from out of the darkness, and they cried out for God's love, even though they didn't know how to say it. And I gave them whatever I could, of my food, of my clothing, of the animals I guarded. I gave them my love. God's love. There is nothing else. Will you admit me?
Yes.
And how will I begin? Will I bring food to the people, or will I take care of the sick?
You will begin serving God right now by sweeping the floor.
Starting at the bottom. Yeah, he spent a lot of time at the bottom, St. Patrick, in the fields and being a slave. It's really a great story. We're right around the corner from St. Patrick's Cathedral here. I stopped in there actually earlier today, and a lot of people think, shamrocks and beer when they think St. Patrick. You've dispelled a lot of that here, Matti.
It's a beautiful story because, I had the fortune to direct this episode, and we went to Ireland to do it. There was really no other place you could shoot this. And it's such an interesting thing because Patrick learns God in captivity. It's because he becomes a slave and because he's forced to really be, on the one hand, alone with himself, and then with the pagans that he meets, who he ultimately converts. It's funny, that scene, the clip that you just showed, of course, is after that happens. And even there, you see that he still needs to learn the lesson of ego, because now he thinks like, oh, well, I'm the guy who's going to feed everyone. I'm the guy that's going to do good. And he still has to learn that lesson, which is such an amazing journey that he has to go on. And then ultimately he does return back to Ireland, not to give it away, but, really Irish Catholicism is such an important part of world Catholicism. And it all starts with St. Patrick.
So tell us a little bit about some of the other episodes and what we have to look forward to, Matti.
Well, coming up next is Peter, which is an incredible story because he is, just a fisherman who is a working class guy who's not educated, and he has this encounter with Jesus and starts to follow him and realize something really special has happened. But he's a guy who really almost until the end doesn't feel worthy. And of course, his very famous denial is something that we deal with in this. It's a beautiful episode. And that's coming up next. Great actors in that as well. I think maybe you mentioned this, but we try to make these very visceral and very real. And so we are making them, anyone who believes is going to recognize what they believe in the episode. But frankly, I want atheists to watch this episode and perhaps be inspired. I'm very interested in that idea. So Peter's after that, and then followed by Beckett. And then in December, I think December 7th, Mr. Scorsese's daughter, Francesca, directed really her first professional thing that she's done. She's a very young woman, very talented. The apple did not fall far from the tree. and she directed the life of Carlo Acutis, who was just recently canonized by Pope Leo. So very modern saint, and that'll be the first four until Easter.
Yeah, I think it's great that this young director is the person to take on this young saint. And we were in Rome when Pope Francis died and covered the funeral. And that week, Carlo Acutis was supposed to be canonized. And so there were, everywhere we went, there were banners with his face on it and, buttons and prayer books and rosaries, because all of these people were coming for his canonization ceremony at the Vatican. But it was all postponed, obviously, because the Pope's funeral took precedence. So he was canonized a little bit later than that. Tell people, I think it's very interesting because, to make this young man a saint who is sort of known as someone who embraced technology to spread his faith, very modern. It says a lot about what the church wants to embed in people's hearts about the possibility of becoming saints themselves.
I think, first of all, I was in Rome at the time, and we had planned to shoot the canonization of Carlo. We actually had access, and the Vatican had granted us access to shoot it as part of the show. And then, of course, His Holiness Pope Francis died, which was, very sad. I think with Carlo, what you see, they call him the influencer saint, which is kind of an interesting thing to note. I think Carlo used technology mostly to spread his Eucharistic miracles. I think in Carlo, there is a huge resurgence of young people now coming back towards Catholicism and Christianity generally. Mm-hmm. And if we went to Assisi to shoot parts of this episode, and we saw lines around the block at Carlo's tomb. And I have to say that, it's such a double-edged sword. I think in many ways, social media, especially for young people, it's the devil. It's the comparative ego staring you in the face and making you feel like you're not worthy. And here's a young man who takes technology. He lived a little bit earlier. He died in 2006, and he was very young. He died at 15. But he takes technology and he uses it for good. He uses it to spread this very positive message. And I think that's very interesting. And I do think that young people today are especially resonant to that idea that this tool of social media doesn't just have to be used in a negative way. And I think that, I like to think of the fact that every day you could be meeting a saint. You just don't know who you're meeting. Like, you could meet somebody. I think that is implicit in the idea of sainthood, is that if we try to treat people with dignity, if you knew you were meeting a saint, you definitely wouldn't be a jerk about it. And I think that that's really interesting. And I think that the Catholic Church is making a real attempt to embrace a new constituency of people. And I ultimately think that's very positive.
You mentioned Peter, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the episode on Peter, because I think he is so human and so failed in so many ways. And I think of the moment on the beach when Jesus says, you're going to be fishers of men now. And he says, get away from me. I'm a sinner. Like, you don't want me. I'm not your guy. And
we
it's
actually
an incredible moment.
We did shoot that. We shot that scene, and we shot that scene in Sicily on the water. A very complicated scene to shoot because they're fishing, and water is always difficult to shoot anyway. And we really tried to capture that. And I think there's this brilliant Israeli actor called Liav Turjuman who plays Peter, and he's just so much of that place, and he's such a kind of tough guy. It's really interesting.
Has this project, has it changed you in any way?
I want to say yes. I mean, first of all, I get to work with arguably one of the greatest filmmakers in the world, and we are in close contact, and he's incredibly involved in the project. So that has changed me. He's also a deeply spiritual person, and a person who really questions things in the right way. It's changed me in the sense that, I'm interested in a lot of things, but I actually think that at the end, the only real conversation to have is, what do you believe in? And it's changed me because for the last 2 years, this is season 2, and we went right into season 2 from season 1. I have been privileged to be engaged in a conversation about what people believe. And to me, that is the greatest privilege of all. So it's changed me in that way. If I could continue doing it, there's 10,000 saints in the Catholic canon alone, so I could do it.
You could be very busy. I don't know if your parents are still with you. And when you say the most important question is, what do you believe? What's the impact on your relationship with them as atheists?
So my father, unfortunately, died many years ago. He was very old. And my mother is very much alive at 92. And she's still a kind of dyed-in-the-wool atheist, but she loves the show. And she understands it, And I think she's not surprised at all that I would make a show like that. So, we have very good, very respectful conversations. But, for me, I have a lot of atheist friends, and, I have a lot of compassion for atheists. I think it's hard to be a believer, but I think it's even harder to be an atheist.
Interesting. I just want to play the season, the trailer. This is actually, I think this is going to be the season 1 trailer. Let's listen to it, because I want to leave everybody with some of the sounds of these really extraordinary episodes. Watch.
What is redemption?
To know that anything can be forgiven by God. That's the gift that God gave us.
It's not wise to keep company of this man, this Jesus. He is not your Messiah.
Lord, I confess my weakness for the things of this world. So many things.
Why is it you won't just do what I want?
I cannot, my lord. I must not.
My heart is bursting, my lord. Bursting.
What's your Christ to me?
When someone is hungry, he feeds them. But when I speak to him, he answers.
Answer before the king.
I will do no such thing.
I warn you, you're no longer under his protection.
I am under God's.
I have a calling. I have no choice. I need to follow. Now.
Patrick, now it is time for you to return home.
I'm coming to understand that only you can care for your soul. It's precious.
Examine your heart. What is unspoken? Let it speak within you.
That is a look at season 2. It gives me chills. It's really so well done. Matti Leshem, thank you so much for joining us today. And we encourage everybody to start watching with St. Patrick and then continue through the rest of the season. Matti, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Martha. It's really a great pleasure. I really appreciate it.
That is the Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum. We'll see you next time.